Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you for joining me today. This is episode 119 of Hockey on the Spot. And, we have another playoff series ended last night. Congratulations to the Pittsburgh Penguins. They defeated the Columbus Blue Jackets 4-2 last night in Game 6. Game 6 was in Columbus. So that series has officially come to an end. I think everybody expected that the Penguins were going to win this series. However, Columbus, you got to give the Blue Jackets a lot of credit for this series. First franchise playoff victory in game number 2, and then first franchise playoff victory at home in game 4. Both overtime victories. In game 4 in particular, a 3-0 comeback effort. So you give a lot to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Praise them for a lot. The best season in franchise history by far so far in their franchise. They're still young. They still got a long way to go. They're just going to get better from here, and they've taken pretty much the next step or maybe even the first step in being a legitimate hockey franchise. The next step for them now is to actually win a playoff series. So it's going to be an interesting season in Columbus next year for sure. Now, as far as the series as a whole, here were the final scores. Game 1 in Pittsburgh, a 4-3 win for the Pittsburgh Penguins. That came in regulation. The Pittsburgh Penguins were losing 3-1 in that game, but rallied back to win 4-3. And that was a constant theme in the series. Teams taking a 3-1 lead and then blowing it late. Same thing happened in Game 2. The Penguins at home held a 3-1 lead, but blew it to the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Jackets went on to win in overtime. Courtesy of Matt Calvert's overtime winner. It would be his second of the game as well, actually. Game 3, series shifts to Columbus. Same thing. Blue Jackets hold a 3-1 lead. Penguins score 3 goals in a span of 2 minutes and I believe 15 seconds. And come back to win by yet another 4-3 final. Game number 4. This was a comeback of different sorts. Yes, it was 3-1 at one point in favor of Pittsburgh, but it was also 3-0 prior to that. Pens held a 3-0 lead, and that was by far Marc-Andre Fleury's worst game of the playoffs. He cost them at the end, making a bad play in the defensive zone, thinking he can clear the puck, and turning it over and leaving a net wide open. And then the overtime winner, he definitely could have stopped. Just a long wrister that should never have gone in. Brandon Dubinsky would tie up the game, and Nick Foligno would score the overtime winner. That would be the first playoff win in Columbus. So 4-3 in overtime was the final in Game 4. Game 5, for the first time in that series, a 3-1 lead was sustained, although the third goal came via an empty net. The Penguins would win Game 5 at home by a final score of 3-1. That was Fleury's best playoff game in recent memory and his best game of that whole series. And then last night, Game 6, the Penguins close out the series in Columbus with a 4-3 win. They actually held a 4-0 lead, but the Blue Jackets came back to make it a 1-goal game but couldn't find that fourth goal. So 4-3 was the final again. And congrats to Evgeny Malkin, the first hat-trick of the 2014 Stanley Cup playoffs this year. So a great game for him and the number 1 star of that game. Malkin finally gets on the board. Sidney Crosby has yet to find his first playoff goal this year, though. So we'll continue to watch that as the playoffs move forward. The Penguins, the first team of the Metropolitan Division to move to the next round, and they await their next opponent They will play the winner of the New York Rangers and Philadelphia Flyers. Be sure to catch that game. That will be the only playoff game for tonight. Game 6 in Philadelphia. Rangers with a chance to close out the series. So we'll see what happens. If the Flyers win, Game 7 will be the following day on Wednesday back at Madison Square Garden. That will be the first back. If the Flyers win, that would be the first back-to-back of the playoffs this year. Now, as to why the Penguins won this series. Once again, I talked about it. Marc-Andre Fleury, best postseason series in recent memory, especially in Game 5. Yeah, he had a bad game in Game 4, and he gave up 3 goals in this last game. However, he could not have stopped any one of those goals in last night's game. They were very hard to stop. So, kudos to Marc-Andre Fleury. I know a lot of you might be thinking he really did not have a good series, but believe me, he did, with the exception of Game 4. So, you know, now we got to just see if that will hold out for the next round. Then, another reason, the offense on the Penguins' blue line. It's hard to believe, but the defensive pair of Matt Niskanen and Paul Martin had more points than the forward duo of Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Obviously, again, Malkin had the hat trick last night, but he had not had a good series up until last game. And as for Sidney Crosby, he's had assists in the series, but he only is getting 1 per game, and he hasn't gotten a goal yet, which is hard to believe considering it's Sidney Crosby. You know, he had 6 assists in 6 games. So, I mean, that's pretty decent, I guess, but it means nothing if you can't score goals, you know? And that's what Sidney Crosby, even though he's a playmaker, this is a guy who should be scoring goals in the playoffs. So, you know, that's one thing Columbus did very well in this series, shutting down number 87, the captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So, yes. Another reason, the Penguins constantly getting shots on goal and giving Sergei Bobrovsky more than he can handle. You know, Sergei Bobrovsky, not an easy goaltender to beat, very athletic. He's built himself quite a resume since arriving in Columbus. You know, they kept shooting and believing that goals would come, and they were right. They got 21 goals on 219 shots. That's 36.5 shots per game, and that led all teams in the postseason in the first round. You know, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Kunitz, and James Neal all had 20 or more shots, and there were 11 other skaters with at least 10. So, Sergei Bobrovsky was much busier than he would have liked to have been. Not to mention the Penguins' depth down the middle. They are very deep down the middle at center. Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Brandon Sutter. Brandon Sutter had a very good series. And then you got their fourth-line center, very underrated player in Joe Vitale, who is just the physical force on that Penguins team. He was very good in the postseason with his physical play. But again, Brandon Sutter may have been the best center overall in the whole series. He tied for the team lead with 3 goals and won 50% of his faceoffs before getting injured late in the second period of Game 6. Brandon Sutter suffered an injury in Game 6 and did not return. That'll be a big concern for the Penguins, and they'll be hoping that he gets back soon. He's hoping he can get back soon because they're going to need him for whoever they go up against in the next round. The New York Rangers and the Philadelphia Flyers, 2 teams that have both given the Penguins a little bit of trouble this season. So we'll see what happens. And then also, and then the final reason the Pittsburgh Penguins won was that they managed to stay out of the box. They were very clean. They were very clean. They didn't take too many penalties, and they didn't lose their cool. And Marc-Andre Fleury kept his composure after that terrible Game 4. So, Brandon Dubinsky hounded Crosby all over the ice, frustrating him at every turn, but he never let the frustration show. We all know Sidney Crosby and Brandon Dubinsky have a huge rivalry. They do not like each other at all. You had to feel that Dubinsky was going to be doing that to Crosby all series long. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how the Penguins handle themselves in the next round again. Whoever they face in the next round is going to give them a challenge. That much we know. Always a test for them going up against their Pennsylvania rivals, the Philadelphia Flyers. But how about the New York Rangers against them this year? They tied the season series with the Penguins this year, and they just overall played very well in that season series. And that first game of that season series, it was a Ranger domination. 5-1 was the final score. They also played each other prior to the Olympic break, and the Rangers won that one in a shootout. So Rangers, and also, they're a much better team than they were at that point now too. So Penguins got to watch out for whoever they play in the next round. Regardless, they will get home ice advantage in the next round. They'll be happy about that. But it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a good series, whoever they play next round. Now, as to why the Columbus Blue Jackets lost the series, well, you obviously factor the opposite of what happened with the Penguins. Sergei Bobrovsky, handled more shots, took more shots than he can handle. The Columbus defense wasn't there for him at all times. At times Bobrovsky had to stand on his head on his own. So, that can give goaltenders problems for sure. The fact that the Blue Jackets are a very young team also played a huge factor in this. I don't believe there's really, with the exception of Nathan Horton, there's really nobody on this Penguins team that has really been there before to win a championship. And they didn't even have Nathan Horton for the entire playoffs, let alone most of the season. They really do not have a whole lot of experience. Brandon Dubinsky and Artem Anisimov have both been to the Eastern Conference Finals with the New York Rangers, but that's not going to win you. That's not going to win you cups. That we're talking about the cup here, and that's not going to win you cups. And even the healthy scratches, none of them had ever been as far as the finals, with the exception again of Nathan Horton. Nathan Horton has been there twice, and he won the Stanley Cup once. He is the only Cup veteran on their team, and he was unhealthy for most of the season and all of the playoffs. Put him in the lineup, and maybe there's a difference made. Who knows? R.J. Umberger, he's been in the Eastern Conference Finals before, but he didn't play the last couple games. So they were without him. But then you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and the lineup they have. First, consider the players that, were scratched. Brooks Orpik, he didn't play. I believe he's hurt. Yeah, Brooks Orpik is out with an injury, and he's one of their Cup veterans. None of the other scratches are Cup veterans on the team. Thomas Vokoun has never won a Cup, but he was part of that Penguins team last year that played so well and went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Rob Scuderi, he's won a couple Cups, one with Pittsburgh in 2009 and one with the Los Angeles Kings a couple of years back, 2012, plus a third finals appearance back in 2008 with the Penguins, so he's a Cup veteran. Paul Martin, he obviously went to the Eastern Conference Finals with the Penguins last year. Chris Kunitz, part of two Cup teams with the Anaheim Ducks in 2007 and with the Penguins in 2009. Craig Adams, he was a part of that '09 Penguins team that won the cup. Chris Letang, he was a part of that '09 Penguins team that won the cup. He was also part of the team prior to that as a rookie. And then, of course, Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. They both were part of that '09 team. So the Penguins don't have as much of that cup team as they had in previous years, but they still have a significant amount of it, more than enough to beat out the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets are a young team trying to find their place in the National Hockey League. And then, of course, Marc-Andre Fleury as well. Can't forget the goaltender, part of both teams. But yes, that's, usually the teams with the cup experience are going to come out on top over the teams that have little to none. There have been cases where it's gone the opposite, but, it rarely happens. But you got to give the Columbus Blue Jackets a lot of credit for their physical game last night. Every player on the ice had at least one hit, and Brandon Dubinsky, he had 9 hits in the game. Blake Como and Matt Calvert both had 6. Jack Skeely and Nick Foligno both had 5, and then James Wisniewski had 4. So, a lot of hitting going on for the Columbus Blue Jackets last night. But anyway, back to the matter at hand. And probably another thing that definitely can have a lot to do with it was the regular season series. During the regular season, the Columbus Blue Jackets couldn't buy a win against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they only led once out of the 5 games. They only had a lead once, and that lead did not last for very long. I believe that lead only lasted for a couple minutes. Now, obviously, Corey Tropp would go on to score the highlight goal of the season series, but that doesn't mean anything. The Penguins would win all 5 meetings, and a lot of them in decisive fashion, too. The only real good game Columbus played against them was the 3rd meeting in Columbus. It was only a 5-3 victory for the Penguins, but they had the Blue Jackets' number all season long. So that has a lot to do with it. There have been situations where the team that's been swept by one team has come out on top to win in the playoffs. Go back to 2009 in the second round. The Boston Bruins and the Carolina Hurricanes. Bruins swept the season series with the Hurricanes that year, but the Hurricanes went on to win in 7 games. So it does happen where the team that's been swept can come back to win in the playoffs, but more often than not, if you're getting swept in a season series, if you sweep a team in a season series, more likely than not, you're gonna come out on top. So there you have it with that. And those are pretty much the reasons why the Columbus Blue Jackets lost. There's only a few of them. I'm not going to really start going into 5. It's not as important. But now, obviously, again, with the end of the season comes all the big questions. And the biggest one of all, what happens with Columbus now? What's Columbus going to do this offseason? As we take a look at their free agents now, surprisingly enough, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they don't really have too many huge names as far as free agents go. Unrestricted free agents, Derek McKenzie's an unrestricted free agent. He's 32 years of age. But is a huge part of their depth, so you can kind of see them signing him back. Blake Como, also a huge part of their depth. Former New York Islander, maybe they sign him back. He played very well for them. And then Jack Skeely, who, was kind of a regular in their lineup for most of this year, but I don't know. I don't know if they're going to sign him, though. I don't really know too much about Jack Skeely. Not just a player who never lived up to his draft status. On defense, Nikita Nikitin and Nick Schultz. I don't think Nick Schultz is going to be back in Columbus, but and then you got Nikita Nikitin, and who knows with him too. Nikita Nikitin's a solid player, and he really needs to go somewhere where he can thrive as a top 6 defenseman. It's not going to get done in Columbus, in my opinion. So, especially with a young Ryan Murray on the rise. And they still got James Wisniewski, Fedor Tootin, Jack Johnson. David Savard is on the rise. Dalton Prout, a player on the rise. Tim Erickson, a player on the rise. So, yeah, they got a lot of defense prospects that they can turn to. Cody Golubov is another one. So, they got a lot to turn to on defense. So, I don't necessarily see Nikita Nikitin or Nick Schultz coming back. And then in goal, Curtis McElhaney, who was a very good backup goaltender for the Columbus Blue Jackets this year. Do they re-sign him, or do they go look for another backup goaltender that maybe can relieve Bobrovsky of some games? McElhaney, I feel like, proved himself this year, but he did prove himself this year, in my opinion. He came up big when Bobrovsky was injured, I think, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. With the Blue Jackets, really unsure about any of these guys, really, because none of these guys are really big names, And then in their system, they got Cody Bass, Mike McKenna, Frederick St. Denis, Patrick McNeil, Matt Taormina, another defenseman who has seen roster time before. Who knows if they're going to sign any of these guys? Then they don't really matter. Restricted free agents, they got a few. Ryan Johansson, Corey Tropp, and Matt Fratton. I don't think they're going to bring back Matt Fratton, and I don't even think they'll bring back Corey Tropp. But Ryan Johansson, absolutely. They're going to bring him back. They're going to give him a nice, lengthy contract. He's a superstar in the making, and he is the future in Columbus. 4th overall pick from 2010. He is the future in Columbus. He is the next Rick Nash in Columbus. And he's a popular player as it is. He was their leading scorer this year. He's just going to get even more popular, and he's going to become a threat all around the league. He's a star in the making. So, Ryan Johansson, he'll definitely be back in Columbus. And then on defense, David Savard and Dalton Prout, they're both restricted free agents. I can see them signing these guys. They're ready for the young defensemen to come up. They're ready to get younger on defense. So, these guys can definitely play. And these guys have shown it before. They're ready to play full time. And then even though this guy isn't a restricted free agent until the following season, Sergei Bobrovsky, he only has a year left on his contract. It's going to be interesting to see when they're going to start talking about a possible contract extension with him. So we'll keep, definitely be keeping you updated on that. And then, of course, some of the bigger restricted free agent names in their system: Tim Erickson, Cody Golubov, Sean Collins II, Jeremy Smith. They got some pretty decent names. Carter Camper, Dana Tyrell. So we'll see what happens. They're gonna have a lot to think about this offseason. They are absolutely gonna have a lot to think about this season. But they'll worry about that as time goes on. First, they got to get through the draft. And you can expect that the Columbus Blue Jackets, they have a lot of good future players coming up soon. Kirby Reichel, Marco Dano, Alexander Wenberg, I think is the other one. But they have some good players that they drafted from last year, and they're excited about their future coming up. So, they're going to be a good team in the future, but for now, they're going to have to handle a tough loss. So, again, congratulations to the Pittsburgh Penguins. They defeat the Columbus Blue Jackets in 6 games, winning Game 6 last night, 4-3 in Columbus. They will go on to the second round to play the winner of the New York Rangers and the Philadelphia Flyers. Other games from last night's action: the Minnesota Wild managed to stay alive and force a Game 7 in Colorado. they scratch off a Game 6 victory on home ice with a very decisive 5-2 victory over the Colorado Avalanche, even though 2 of those goals were empty net goals. A big performance by Zach Parise. 2 goals in the game, including the game winner. And then, how about the Los Angeles Kings? Once again, managed to stay alive. Game 6 at home at the Staples Center. Sharks with a 3-2 series lead. They have officially blown a 3-0 series lead as the Kings win Game 6 on home ice by a final score of 4-1. Very decisive win. It was tied at one point, 1-1, but a big third period by the Kings. 2 goals by Justin Williams, 2 goals by Anze Kopitar, and then the Sharks' only goal scored by James Shepherd, his second of the playoffs. So, the Sharks also starting their backup goaltender in this game, Alex Stalock, rather than Antti Niemi, who had a rough Game 5. So, the Kings erase a 3-0 series deficit to force a Game 7 in San Jose. Be sure to check it out. Game 7 in Colorado and Game 7 in San Jose against the Wild and Kings, respectively. Both of those games will be on Wednesday, so be sure to check that out. Obviously, the Sharks, they can still win the series, but now it's just anybody's game. It's a winner-take-all situation, and we know the Kings have struggles in that building. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. And then probably the most interesting thing of all is which goaltender will get the start for the Sharks in Game 7. Will it be Antti Niemi? Will they go back to Antti Niemi? Or will they continue with Alex Stalock? Going to be interesting. Going to be really interesting. We know who's going to start for the Kings, Jonathan Quick. But the winner will move on to face another California rival in the Anaheim Ducks. So, very exciting. And then, of course, as I said, don't forget, be sure to tune in tonight. Tonight, only one playoff game, Game 6 between the New York Rangers and the Philadelphia Flyers. That will be an NBC Sports Network broadcast, also on MSG for those of you who live in the local area, like me. And Game 6 at the Wells Fargo Center. Game 6 in Philadelphia. The Rangers with the chance to close out the series. However, if the Flyers win, Game 7 will also be on Wednesday. So we have a potential of 3 Game 7s on Wednesday, depending on what happens to the Rangers tonight. Again, Flyers need to win this game and force a Game 7 back to Madison Square Garden. Going to be interesting to watch. Very exciting series, 2 arch rivals, so be sure to check that one out. The winner will go on to face the Pittsburgh Penguins in the next round. And for the Avalanche and Wild, the winner will go on to face the Chicago Blackhawks in the next round. And that's going to do it for episode 119 of Hockey on the Spot. Thank you guys for joining me today. This has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. I'll see you guys again tomorrow, possibly. If the Rangers win, I'll see you guys again tomorrow. If not, then I'll take a day break and see you guys again Thursday. So thank you and have a great day.